I came to marry you and give you sons, said the obese woman the Mafia boss saved 20 years ago. On his 40th birthday, a feared crime lord finds a plus-sized stranger at his door, holding a bloodstained locket from his past. Once a terrified child he rescued from chains, now she's returned to claim his promise. When assassins attack during their reunion, she saves his life with shocking combat skills no one saw coming. To protect her, he announces their engagement, a desperate lie that suddenly puts a target on both their backs. But as they're forced together, bodies start appearing with her encrypted signature carved into their flesh. Someone is setting her up, someone who knows about their shared past. The FBI is closing in, his men want her dead, and the nightmare she thought was buried might be pulling the strings from the shadows. Is she his salvation or his destruction? And what happens when the man who saved her life can no longer tell if she's there to love him or destroy everything he's built? From his position behind his mahogany desk, Ivano studied the woman before him with dangerous intensity. Her amber eyes held no fear as she met his gaze directly, a rare occurrence in his world of downcast looks and nervous deference. The locket dangled from her fingers, its tarnished surface catching the low light. Giuseppe stepped forward, hand moving toward his weapon. Boss, should I remove her? Ivano raised one hand, silencing his underboss without taking his eyes off the stranger. Her curves filled out an elegant black dress that spoke of careful preparation for this encounter. But it was those eyes that tugged at his memory. Eyes he'd seen before, decades ago, filled with tears and desperate hope. Everyone out, Ivano ordered softly, the kind of soft that made his most hardened men move quickly. Sir, security protocol, Luca began from his position by the door. Out! This time, Ivano's voice carried an edge that brooked no argument. The room cleared swiftly, though he noted Giuseppe's reluctance and Romano's calculating glance between him and the woman. When the door clicked shut, Ivano rose slowly from his chair, his movements deliberate as he rounded the desk. That locket, he said. Where did you get it? You gave it to me. Her voice carried strength despite the slight tremor. The night you found me, the night you saved 12 girls from that warehouse, including me. The memory slammed into him with brutal clarity. A raid on a Falcone trafficking operation, 12 terrified girls huddled in filthy cells, and one small child with amber eyes who'd clung to his leg, refusing to let go until he'd given her his mother's locket as a promise of protection. Elisa, he breathed the name, the little girl who made me promise. Not so little anymore. She stepped closer, her perfume carrying notes of vanilla and amber. You told me to keep the locket safe, that one day I could return it when I was ready to collect on your debt. Ivano's jaw tightened. I remember a child's promise made in trauma, not a binding contract. You gave your word. Elisa's chin lifted. You said any debt owed to the Ricci family must be repaid. Well, you owed me safety, protection, a future. I'm here to collect by offering you what you need most. An heir, a family of your own. A harsh laugh escaped him. You think you can walk into my world, into my life, and claim such a position? Do you have any idea how many women have tried to trap me with claims of connection or destiny? How many showed up with your mother's locket? She held it out. How many knew that inside is an inscription? To my beloved Maria, until the stars fade. Ivano's hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her wrist. Not quite bruising, but commanding absolute stillness. With his other hand, he took the locket and clicked it open. The inscription gleamed exactly as she'd quoted. Knowing about the locket doesn't give you the right to make demands, he said, voice dangerously low. My world isn't a fairy tale where childhood promises guarantee happy endings. I didn't come for a happy ending. Elisa didn't try to pull away from his grip. I came because that night changed both our lives. You saved me, gave me hope, showed me that even in darkness there can be honor. I've spent 20 years becoming someone worthy of standing beside you. His grip tightened fractionally. And what makes you think you're worthy now? The same thing that made you worthy of my trust then. I keep my promises. She stepped closer until barely inches separated them. You need an heir. You need someone who sees past your power to the man beneath. I need to fulfill my vow. We can help each other. Ivano studied her face, searching for signs of deception. He found only determination and something else, a banked heat that sparked recognition in his blood. This was not the child he'd saved, but a woman who'd clearly done her research, planned her approach, and chosen her moment with precision. You realize what you're asking? His voice roughened. To be my wife means entering a world of violence, betrayal, and constant danger. One wrong move could get you killed. I survived being trafficked at 12. I survived foster care. I survived building myself from nothing. Elisa's free hand came up to rest against his chest, fearless despite his obvious danger. I'm not asking for safety. I'm offering you partnership. The door burst open, Giuseppe entering with gun drawn. Boss, we have reports of... He stopped short at the scene before him. Ivano didn't release Elisa's wrist or step away. Unless Chicago is currently burning, it can wait. Sir, with respect, we need to verify her identity, her background. Luca, Ivano called, knowing his security chief would be monitoring. Full background check on Elisa. I want everything from the night of the warehouse raid forward, now. Already running it, sir, Luca's voice came through the intercom. Initial results confirm her story about the raid. More details incoming. Ivano finally released Elisa's wrist, but remained close enough to feel the heat of her body. You'll stay here while we verify your claims. If you're lying about anything. I'm not. She rubbed her wrist but didn't retreat. Check everything. I have nothing to hide. Giuseppe, have Maria prepare the blue guest suite. Ivano's eyes never left Elisa's face. Post extra security. No one enters or exits without my direct approval? Yes, boss. Giuseppe's disapproval radiated as he backed out, closing the door. So I'm to be your prisoner, Elisa asked. You're to be my guest. Ivano picked up his mother's locket, studying it before returning his gaze to her. Until I decide if you're also to be my wife. Ivano stared at the locket dangling from Elisa's fingers, its silver surface dulled by age but unmistakable. Bloodstains had permanently darkened the metal's delicate etching, a stark reminder of that night 20 years ago. Elisa Moretti, he whispered, the name emerging from depths of memory he rarely allowed himself to visit. The warehouse raid flashed through his mind, the stench of fear and filth, chains rattling in darkness, whimpers of children who'd forgotten how to cry out loud. He'd been younger then, still proving himself worthy of leading the Ricci family. The tip about Falcone's trafficking operation had been his chance to show Chicago that the new generation of Ricci leadership would not tolerate certain crimes. He remembered finding her huddled in the corner, amber eyes huge in a dirt-streaked face. Unlike the other children who cowered, she'd watched him with calculation beyond her years. When he'd knelt to break her chains, she'd grabbed his sleeve. Are you an angel? She'd asked. He'd almost laughed at the absurdity. Him, an angel, with blood on his hands from the guards he'd killed on his way in. No, Piccola, just a man. Then you're better than an angel, she'd declared with child's logic. Angels only watch. You came to save us. Present day. Elisa's voice pulled him back. You gave me the locket when I wouldn't let go of your jacket, said I could return it when I was ready to collect on your debt. Across the room, Giuseppe shifted uneasily, hand near his weapon. Ivano understood his concern. Anyone knowing such personal details about the boss was a potential threat. You promised me safety that night, Elisa continued. I promised to become strong enough to stand beside you. Her lips curved. Though I doubt you expected this packaging when I made that vow. She gestured to her plus-size frame, wrapped in an elegant black dress that emphasized rather than hid her curves. Ivano recognized the deliberate strategy in her appearance. In a world obsessed with model-thin arm candy, she'd crafted herself to be overlooked, underestimated. After you rescued us, I was placed with the Morettis, she said. Good people. They helped me heal, encouraged my education, never tried to make me forget what happened, just helped me transform it into strength. They died in a car crash, Ivano stated, watching her reaction. That's what the police report says. Her eyes hardened. 10 years later, I discovered it was a Castellano hit. Wrong place, wrong time when they were targeting someone else. By then, I'd already begun planning my return to you. Planning what exactly? Becoming someone useful. I have 3 degrees in computer science and information security. I speak 6 languages. I've built a network of contacts across every major crime family in North America. She stepped closer. I've spent 20 years learning to survive in your world. Giuseppe moved forward. Boss, we should... The distinctive buft of silenced weapons cut through his warning. Screams erupted from the main hall below. Ivano's hand moved toward his shoulder holster, but Elisa was faster. She slammed into him with surprising strength, driving them both to the floor as the windows exploded inward. Glass rained down as bullets tore through the space where he'd been standing. She rolled smoothly, producing a matte black handgun from beneath her dress. Her movements were practiced, efficient, not the panicked reaction of a civilian. She pressed him down with one hand when he tried to rise. "Stay down," she ordered, eyes cold and focused on the windows. "I didn't survive 20 years to watch you die before you fulfill your end of our bargain." "Castellanos," Ivano growled, recognizing the attack pattern. Only they would be bold enough to hit his compound during such a public event. Giuseppe and the other guards had taken defensive positions, returning fire at the muzzle flashes visible from the surrounding buildings. But Elise's attention was elsewhere. She studied the room's shadows with predatory focus. "They're already inside," she said quietly. "This window attack is a distraction. Your office has a hidden entrance behind the bookcase, legacy architecture from Prohibition days. That's their real target point." Ivano's eyes narrowed. That entrance was known only to his most trusted inner circle. "How did you?" "The same way I got past your outer security tonight. I make it my business to know things." She shifted her weapon toward the bookcase. 3 seconds. Right on her count, the hidden door burst open. The first attacker took her bullet in the throat before he cleared the threshold. The second managed 2 steps before Giuseppe's shot dropped him. The third threw something small and cylindrical into the room. "Flash bang!" Elisa shouted. She rolled on top of Ivano, shielding his eyes with her body as the device detonated. Even through closed eyelids, the burst of light was disorienting. His ears rang from the concussive blast, but her weight anchored him, kept him oriented. He felt her shift, heard her weapon bark 3 more times. When his vision cleared, 3 more bodies lay crumpled by the hidden door. Elisa remained in a protective stance over him, gun trained on the entrance, dress hiked up to reveal a thigh holster that explained her easy access to the weapon. "Clear!" Giuseppe called hoarsely from somewhere to their left. "Perimeter breach contained." Luca's voice crackled through the intercom. "Secondary teams engaging hostiles on the grounds. Police have been diverted." Elisa finally looked down at Ivano, her expression unreadable. "Still questioning whether I'm worthy?" Dawn painted Chicago's skyline in muted gold, but inside Ivano's estate, the atmosphere remained dark with tension. Blood stained the imported marble floors, despite his cleaning crew's best efforts. The metallic scent lingered, mixing with gunpowder and expensive cologne. In the war room, Ivano stood before a wall of monitors, his face illuminated by the security footage playing on loop, his eyes fixed on Elisa's movements. Clinical, precise, lethal. No wasted motion, no hesitation. She dropped 3 Castellano soldiers with the efficiency of a trained operative, not the information broker she claimed to be. "Play it again," he commanded, studying her form. The way she anticipated the flash bang, her instant recognition of the hidden entrance, the perfect shot placement that ended 3 lives in seconds. Giuseppe paced behind him, agitation evident in every step. "This woman is a problem, boss. She knows too much. The security protocols, the secret passages. She's either working with the Castellanos or selling to the highest bidder." "Or working against them," Romano interjected from his corner seat, ever the voice of measured reason. "The attack pattern suggests they knew she would be here. They wanted her as much as they wanted you, Ivano." In the adjacent room, 2 of Ivano's most skilled interrogators worked on the sole surviving Castellano assassin. The man's screams occasionally penetrated the soundproofing, punctuating their discussion. Luca entered, his usually pristine suit spattered with evidence of recent violence. "The cleanup teams found something interesting. The Castellanos didn't just hit us here. 3 other locations were targeted simultaneously: the warehouse on Michigan, the shipping office, and the new construction site. All secondary locations," Ivano noted, "meant to divide our response teams." "And all locations that weren't in our official records," Giuseppe added pointedly. Just like that hidden entrance she knew about. The door opened again, admitting a junior soldier. "Boss, the prisoner talked. They had detailed intel on our security rotation, access codes, even the panic room locations. Someone's been feeding them information for months." Ivano's fingers tightened on the back of his chair. "Bring her in." 2 guards escorted Elisa into the war room. She'd traded her bullet-torn evening dress for borrowed clothes, black slacks and a simple blouse that did nothing to diminish her commanding presence. Her amber eyes swept the room, cataloging exits, weapons, threats. "The Castellanos," she said without preamble, "have been planning this hit for 3 months. They've spent millions buying information from every source they could find." Her lips curved. "Unfortunately for them, most of their best intelligence came through shell companies I control." Giuseppe surged forward. You admit to selling us out? I admit to selling them exactly what I wanted them to know, she corrected. Bad intel mixed with just enough truth to be believable. They thought they knew all your security protocols. Instead, they walked into kill boxes I designed. She turned to Ivano. I've spent years feeding poisoned information into their operation, directing them toward law enforcement ambushes, corrupting their money laundering networks, creating paper trails that have half their lieutenants under federal investigation. Why? Romano asked quietly. Because they killed my adoptive parents. Because they traffic children like I used to be. Because they're a cancer that needs to be cut out. She met Ivano's gaze. And because you were the only one strong enough to do the cutting once I gave you the right opening. Giuseppe pulled Ivano aside, his voice urgent. Boss, she's too dangerous. She knows everything about our operation. We can't trust. You're right, Ivano cut him off. She knows too much. He straightened his tie and turned back to the room. A decision crystallized in his mind, unexpected, risky, but potentially brilliant. Gentlemen, he addressed his assembled lieutenants, I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Elisa Moretti. The room went deadly silent. Even Elisa's composure cracked for a fraction of a second before she recovered. Our engagement has been a closely guarded secret for security reasons, Ivano continued smoothly. But after tonight's display of her loyalty, it's time you all knew. He crossed to where she stood, removing his grandmother's ring from his hand, a heavy gold piece set with blood-red rubies. The message in his eyes was clear as he slid it onto her finger. Play along or die. Elisa's response was perfect. She melted against him with practiced affection, tilting her face up with an adoring smile that almost masked the dangerous intelligence in her eyes. This wasn't exactly how I imagined our reunion, Ivano, she whispered, her lips barely moving. His arm settled around her waist, both claiming and constraining. To his men, it would look like an intimate embrace. They both knew it for what it was, a chain, albeit a gilded one. The engagement explains her knowledge of our operations, Romano observed, ever quick to follow Ivano's lead. And her systematic campaign against the Castellanos. Giuseppe's face had turned an interesting shade of purple, but he swallowed whatever objection he'd been about to voice. The other lieutenants followed suit, offering stilted congratulations that couldn't quite hide their unease. Ivano felt Elisa's pulse racing, where his fingers pressed against her wrist, belying her calm exterior. She'd come here prepared for many scenarios, but not this one, not this particular trap, decorated with romance and wrapped in family tradition. Have the staff prepare the East Wing suite for my fiancé, he ordered, and double the security patrols. The Castellanos won't take tonight's failure lightly. His men filed out, leaving him alone with his newly minted fiancée. Elisa didn't pull away from his grip, but he felt the subtle tension in her muscles, like a predator deciding whether to submit or strike. The East Wing suite sprawled before Elisa like a gilded cage. Sunlight streamed through bulletproof windows, catching on crystal chandeliers and casting rainbow patterns across Italian marble floors. Her fingers traced the ornate molding around the connecting door to Ivano's master suite, analyzing its security features with professional interest. 3 days of luxury imprisonment had given her plenty of time to study her surroundings. The cameras were discreet but omnipresent, tucked into light fixtures hidden behind decorative panels. Guards patrolled in precise rotations, their footsteps echoing down hallways at 15-minute intervals. She'd been given free rein of certain areas, the library, the gardens, the main living spaces, but other wings remained firmly off-limits, marked by subtle security measures that spoke volumes about what they protected. Every morning, she joined Ivano for breakfast in the formal dining room, playing the role of adoring fiancé while cataloging exits and blind spots. Elisa moved to the window, watching the grounds crew trim perfectly manicured hedges. Her laptop sat open on an antique desk, screens displaying the careful documentation she'd been maintaining. Guard schedules, security protocols, the estate's electrical and plumbing blueprints she'd accessed through careful probing of their network. The diamond and ruby engagement ring caught the light as she typed, its weight a constant reminder of her gilded chains. Ivano had barely spoken to her since that night, maintaining careful distance while his dark eyes studied her every move. She recognized the calculation in his gaze, the same way he'd assess a potential threat or valuable asset. A noise in the hallway drew her attention. Voices carried through the thick wooden door, Romano and Giuseppe passing by her suite. Can't trust her, Giuseppe's harsh whisper insisted. She knows too much about everyone's operations. The other families are getting nervous. Ivano's protection won't last forever, Romano replied, his tone measured but meaningful. There are ways to make accidents happen, even to valued guests. Sometimes silence is the only guarantee of security. Elisa's fingers stilled on the keyboard as their footsteps faded. Her pulse quickened, but her mind remained cold and focused. She'd survived worse threats than these men. It was time to implement her escape plan. That night, she waited until the 2 a.m. guard rotation. Her fingers flew across the laptop, triggering the cascade of security disruptions she'd carefully prepared. Cameras in her wing froze on loop. Electronic locks disengaged in a carefully timed sequence. She moved silently through darkened hallways, her black clothing blending with shadows. The skills that had kept her alive during years of dangerous information gathering served her well now. Past the indoor pool, through the conservatory, each step carefully planned and timed between guard patrols. The perimeter wall loomed ahead, its security features already disabled by her earlier work. But as she approached the spot she'd chosen for her climb, a familiar figure melted from the darkness. "Running already?" Ivano's voice carried quiet menace beneath its silk. "And here I thought you came to be my wife." Elisa didn't flinch or try to flee. She'd learned long ago that showing fear only encouraged predators. "I came on my terms," she said evenly. "Not to be a prisoner in a gilded cage, watched every moment for signs of betrayal." "You think the cage is about control?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "The Castellanos recognized you during the attack. They know exactly who you are now. The ghost who's been systematically dismantling their operations for years. The shadow broker who's cost them millions and sent their best lieutenants to prison." His words landed like physical blows, but she kept her face impassive. "I can handle the Castellanos." "Like your parents handled them?" The words stopped her cold. Ivano stepped closer, his expression hardening. "That car accident 5 years ago? The brake lines weren't worn, they were cut. The Castellanos killed your adoptive parents thinking they could get to me through you, through the girl I saved." The world tilted sideways. Elisa's knees hit garden dirt as the truth crushed down on her. All her careful planning, her years of strategic warfare against the Castellanos. She'd thought she was the hunter. Instead, she'd been the bait in a blood feud she never saw coming. And her parents, the gentle souls who'd helped her heal after her rescue, had paid the price for her connection to Ivano. Her fingers dug into soft earth as memories assaulted her. Her mother's laugh as they baked cookies, her father's proud smile at her college graduation, the police at her door with news of the accident. All this time, she'd thought she was avenging them by targeting the Castellanos. Instead, she'd been avenging a murder she helped cause just by existing. Ivano's expensive shoes appeared in her line of sight, but he didn't touch her. His silence was somehow worse than any words could be, letting her absorb the full weight of her choices and their consequences. The night air grew thick with moisture, promising rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Elisa remained on her knees in the dirt, her carefully constructed world, crumbling around her as the past she thought she understood reformed into something darker and more devastating. Morning sunlight spilled across Ivano's mahogany desk, casting long shadows over the tense scene. Elisa sat ramrod straight in the leather chair across from him, her amber eyes steady, despite the exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath them. 2 days had passed since her failed escape attempt, 2 days of silence and surveillance that had led them to this moment. "Your skills are valuable," Ivano said, breaking the heavy silence. "But trust must be earned." His fingers drummed once on the polished wood before going still. "And my freedom?" Elisa's voice remained level, controlled. "Am I to be your prisoner indefinitely?" "You're alive because I choose to keep you that way." He leaned forward, authority radiating from every inch of his perfectly tailored suit. "Consider it protective custody." A bitter smile touched her lips. "Pretty words for a cage. A cage that will keep you breathing." His dark eyes held hers. "You've made powerful enemies, Kara. The Castellanos don't forgive, and they don't forget." Elisa's hands clenched in her lap, the only outward sign of her inner turmoil. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A mutually beneficial arrangement. Your intelligence skills at my disposal, my protection keeping you alive." He gestured to the adjoining room visible through glass doors. "I've had a secure workstation set up. Everything you need to continue your operations under my supervision." She studied the setup through the glass. State-of-the-art equipment, multiple monitors, security protocols that would make most government agencies jealous. A gilded prison, but one with tools she could use. "And if I refuse?" Then I turn you over to Giuseppe, who has some very creative ideas about dealing with security risks." His tone remained conversational, but the threat was clear. Hours later, Elisa sat at her new workstation, fingers flying across keyboards as she rebuilt her digital fortress within Ivano's domain. She'd adapted to her new routine with outward compliance. Breakfast served in her suite, escort to the office, working under Ivano's watchful eye. If she felt his gaze lingering on her more than necessary, she didn't acknowledge it. The first sign of trouble came as an alert on her security protocols. Someone was probing her networks, testing defenses with expertise that spoke of professional training. Her fingers moved faster, tracking the intrusion. But the attacker was good. Too good. "Ivano." Her voice carried urgency that brought him immediately to her side. "Someone's in my systems, they're—" She broke off as screens began flashing red. "No, no, no!" Database after database fell, encryption crumbling before her eyes. Years of carefully gathered intelligence, client lists, operational details, all exposed. How bad? Ivano's hand gripped the back of her chair, his presence looming over her as she worked desperately to contain the breach. "Catastrophic. They're not just stealing data, they're destroying my entire network," her voice caught. "Your business partners, other families you deal with, everyone who's ever used my services, their identities are compromised." The phone rang before Ivano could respond. Giuseppe's voice carried clearly through the speaker. "Boss, Lorenzo Bianchi is dead. Found in his home office. You need to see this." 20 minutes later, they stood in Lorenzo's study, staring at the gruesome tableau. The businessman's body slumped over his desk, blood pooled beneath him. But it was his bare chest that drew their attention. Carved into the flesh was a string of numbers and symbols Elisa recognized instantly. "That's my encryption signature," she whispered, horror crawling up her throat. "My personal code." "A message," Ivano said grimly. "But from whom?" The answer came in the form of FBI agent James Rossi, appearing at the front desk of Ricci Imports with federal warrant in hand. Elisa watched through security feeds. As he spoke to the manager, his intent clear. The Bureau was investigating both the murder and its connection to a certain information broker. The war room erupted into chaos when word reached Ivano's lieutenants. Giuseppe paced like a caged tiger, gesturing violently. "She's compromised everything, every operation, every connection, and now we have a dead businessman and the FBI breathing down our necks." "The Castellanos would consider her a valuable peace offering," Romano suggested, his calm voice somehow more threatening than Giuseppe's rage. A gesture of goodwill to prevent further escalation. Elisa's heart pounded, but she kept her face impassive. She'd survived worse situations, calculated escape routes, measured odds of survival. Ivano's raised hand cut through the arguing like a knife. Silence fell immediately, his authority absolute even in crisis. "Elisa remains under my personal protection." His voice carried the finality of a death sentence. "From this moment, she stays by my side at all times. I will personally ensure both her safety and her loyalty." His dark eyes found hers across the room, possession and suspicion warring in their depths. "Isn't that what you came for, cara Maya? To never leave my side?" Elisa met his gaze steadily, recognizing the trap closing around her, even as she acknowledged its necessity. She'd wanted his attention, his protection, his trust, but not like this. Never like this. Through the steam seeping from the bathroom, Elisa heard the steady rhythm of the shower. She stood in Ivano's walk-in closet, a space larger than her first apartment, surrounded by the trappings of power and wealth. Her fingers traced the row of suits, each one worth more than most people made in a month. Italian silk, English wool, every piece custom-fitted to his broad frame. The domesticity of the situation struck her as surreal. 24 hours ago, she'd been planning her escape. Now she was arranging her toiletries beside his, preparing to share his private space in a way few had ever been allowed. The shower shut off, and Elisa quickly retreated to the bedroom. They'd established the boundaries with awkward precision earlier. She would take the massive king bed while he slept on the leather sofa in his sitting room, an arrangement that somehow felt more intimate than if they'd simply shared the bed. She busied herself unpacking the few belongings Luca had retrieved from her temporary suite, trying not to think about the man dressing on the other side of the bathroom door. Her new reality was a strange mix of restriction and privilege. During the day, she accompanied Ivano to carefully selected meetings, watching him command rooms with quiet authority. That afternoon, she'd observed him negotiate a shipping contract, his voice never rising above conversational level even as he made it clear failure to comply would have fatal consequences. The other men had practically stumbled over themselves to agree, their fear of him palpable. Yet here in his private space, she saw different sides of him. The way he methodically arranged his cufflinks, how he always loosened his tie the moment they returned from meetings, the fact that he preferred espresso in the morning but American coffee in the afternoon. They worked together in his office, reviewing her client lists for potential targets. The awkwardness gradually eased into reluctant teamwork as they cross-referenced suspicious activities. She had to admit, his strategic mind complemented her analytical skills. But nights were the hardest, lying in his bed, surrounded by his scent, knowing he was just through the sitting room door. The awareness of his proximity made sleep elusive. Moving deeper into the closet, she noticed a safe tucked behind hanging garment bags. The door stood slightly ajar, unusual for someone as careful as Ivano. Curiosity drew her closer. Among the expected documents and cash, a worn photograph caught her eye. Her breath caught as she recognized herself at 12 years old, wrapped in a blanket in the back of an ambulance. The night he saved her. She was still staring at it when Ivano's voice came from behind her. "I see you found it." Elisa turned, startled. He stood in the closet entrance, wearing black slacks and an unbuttoned white shirt, his hair still damp from the shower. The casual state of undress somehow made him more intimidating than his usual suits. "Why did you keep this?" She held up the photo, watching his expression carefully. Something flickered in his dark eyes, an emotion she couldn't quite read. "You were the first person I ever saved," he said quietly, vulnerability seeping through his usual control. "In our world, we destroy far more than we protect. That night, you became a reminder that I wasn't completely lost." He moved closer, his presence filling the confined space of the closet. Elisa resisted the urge to step back, holding her ground even as her pulse quickened. "But I need to know, Elisa." His voice dropped lower. "All these years, all your careful planning to find me again, was it really about some childish promise? Or did you come with another purpose?" His hand lifted toward her face but stopped just short of touching her cheek. The almost contact sparked electricity through the air between them. "Because everyone who gets close to me wants something. Power, money, revenge." His eyes searched hers intently. "What is it you really want from me?" Elisa met his gaze steadily, despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. "I wanted to know if the monster who saved me was real, or just a child's fantasy." She swallowed hard. "I'm still trying to figure that out." The tension between them thickened, years of questions and unspoken thoughts hanging in the air. She was acutely aware of his partial state of undress, the breadth of his chest visible through the open shirt. The scars that marked his skin told stories of survival, of battles won and lost. His eyes darkened at her words, something dangerous and hungry awakening in their depths. But beneath that, she caught a glimpse of uncertainty, as if her answer had unsettled him more than any accusation of ulterior motives would have. They stood frozen in that moment, the childhood photo still between them like a bridge connecting past to present. The steam from his shower had followed him into the closet, making the air thick and warm. His cologne mixed with the leather and wool scents of his wardrobe, creating an atmosphere that was uniquely him. The photo trembled slightly in her hand, and she realized she was shaking. Not from fear. She'd long since learned to master that response. This was something else entirely, something that had been building since the moment she walked into his office 3 days ago. Darkness pressed in around Elisa as chains rattled against concrete. Small hands, her childhood hands, clawed at metal restraints. Rough fingers grabbed her arms, dragging her toward that terrible room. She jolted awake with a strangled cry, sheets tangled around her legs like restraints. For one terrifying moment, she couldn't tell past from present. The luxurious bedroom blurred with memories of concrete cells. The door burst open. Ivano filled the frame, gun drawn, scanning for threats. His bare chest rose and fell with quick breaths, the scars across his torso visible in the dim light. When he saw no intruders, his eyes fixed on Elisa. She couldn't breathe. The panic attack squeezed her chest like a vice, spots dancing at the edges of her vision. Without hesitation, Ivano holstered his weapon and crossed to the bed. "Elisa." His voice cut through the fog of terror. "Look at me. You're safe." She forced her eyes to meet his, anchoring herself in the present. His hand settled on her shoulders, warm and steady. "Breathe with me," he instructed. "Slowly. In, out." Gradually, her breathing synchronized with his, The room stopped spinning. Reality reasserted itself. She was in Ivano's mansion, not that warehouse. She was 32, not 12. The chains, she whispered. I was back there. Understanding darkened his expression. He sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining that grounding contact. I still see it too, he admitted quietly. That warehouse, finding you in that cell. Elise's eyes widened. She'd never considered her rescue might haunt him as well. It was my first encounter with trafficking, he continued, his voice rough. My father's organization had always avoided it, but after his death, some captains thought they could expand into new territories when I discovered what they'd done. His jaw clenched. I eliminated everyone involved. Is that why you helped me? She asked. Guilt over your family's connection? No. His thumb traced absent circles on her shoulder. I helped you because a child was suffering. After that night, I made it clear anyone in my territory involved in trafficking would face immediate execution. No warnings, no second chances. The revelation settled something in Elise's chest. Her research had shown the Ricci family's strict stance against trafficking, but she'd never known the personal reason behind it. Morning found them reviewing security at one of Ivano's upscale nightclubs. Elisa watched him interact with his staff, noting how the bartenders and waitresses showed respect without fear. His protective protocols went beyond standard measures. Panic buttons under every bar, security escorts for closing shifts, background checks on all customers with VIP access. Your cameras have a blind spot, she noted, pointing to a service corridor. Someone could slip through there undetected. Ivano's eyebrows rose slightly. His security team scrambled to address the oversight while he studied her with new interest. That evening, they returned to find Giuseppe waiting in the driveway. His grim expression said everything before he spoke. Marcus Chen is missing. Local PD found his apartment ransacked an hour ago. Elisa's stomach dropped. Chen was another former client, a legitimate businessman who'd hired her to trace corporate espionage. Now he was the second of her contacts to disappear. She sequestered herself in Ivano's office, surrounding herself with data. Hours passed as she cross-referenced files, searching for the pattern she knew must exist. She barely registered changing into comfortable clothes, an oversized t-shirt and leggings as she worked. Reaching for a stack of papers, she winced. Hours of tension had knotted her shoulders into steel cables. Strong hands settled on her shoulders, making her jump. She hadn't heard Ivano enter. You need to rest, he murmured, his fingers finding the worst knots with surprising skill. Her body initially stiffened at the contact before gradually melting under his touch. The heat of his hands seeped through the thin cotton of her shirt, awakening nerve endings she'd been ignoring. Elisa tilted her head back, looking up at him. So do you. Their faces were inches apart, his fingers stilled on her shoulders. For one charged moment, the air between them crackled with possibility. She could feel his breath on her cheek, see the flicker of something dangerous and wanting in his dark eyes. Then he stepped back, professional mask sliding back into place. Tomorrow, he said, voice carefully controlled. I think it's time you see more of my operation. If we're going to find who's behind this, you need to understand exactly what you've walked into. The loss of his touch left her skin tingling. Elisa watched him retreat, knowing they'd both felt that spark of connection, and knowing he'd retreat from it again tomorrow. But for now, the phantom pressure of his hands lingered on her shoulders, a reminder that neither of them was as immune to the other as they pretended to be. The afternoon sun glinted off the SUV's bulletproof glass as they pulled away from the estate gates. Elisa watched the sprawling mansion recede in the side mirror, her first taste of freedom in a week tinged with the knowledge that she'd merely exchanged one form of confinement for another. Ivano sat beside her, his presence filling the vehicle's spacious interior. He wore one of his impeccable suits, the fabric doing little to disguise the lethal grace of his movements, or the gun she knew rested beneath his jacket. First stop is Bellissimo, he said, naming his flagship restaurant. Then we'll check the import warehouse and the new construction site. Their security detail followed in 2 identical black SUVs, maintaining perfect formation. Elisa noted how other vehicles instinctively moved aside, recognizing the convoy's subtle message of power. Bellissimo occupied prime real estate downtown, its elegant facade concealing more than just fine dining. Ivano led her through the main dining room, his hand hovering near the small of her back without quite touching. Staff straightened as he passed, their deference genuine rather than forced. In his private office above the restaurant, Elisa observed his interaction with the manager, how he balanced authority with respect, maintaining control through competence rather than fear. but it was the subtle dynamics with Romano that caught her attention. The consigliere had appeared shortly after their arrival, his timing too perfect to be coincidental. While he showed proper deference to Ivano, something felt off in their interaction. A slight delay before following orders, a hint of challenge in his eyes when Ivano wasn't looking. They moved on to the import business, a legitimate operation handling luxury goods from Italy. Again, Elisa watched the interplay between Ivano's various lieutenants, noting who deferred to whom, who seemed to resent others' authority. The construction site revealed another facet of his empire: union. Contracts and building permits, obtained through means both legal and otherwise. Throughout it all, Ivano maintained an air of absolute control, though Elisa caught him watching her reactions, gauging her response to his world. By early afternoon, they stopped at Bellissimo again for a late lunch. Ivano led her to a private dining room with a view of the city. She'd barely settled into her chair when his phone buzzed. His expression darkened as he read the message. Another encryption signature. Found at Antonio Rossi's house. He's missing. Elisa's appetite vanished. Rossi was another former client, one who'd hired her to trace missing funds in his charitable foundation. "That's 3 now," she said quietly. Ivano's jaw tightened. "We need to stop at the warehouse before heading back. There are documents there that might help identify the pattern." When Elisa excused herself to use the restroom, she noticed Ivano's hesitation before nodding. It was the first time she'd been out of his sight all day. In the elegant bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face, trying to clear her head. Returning to the table, she found her wine glass had been refilled. The first sip tasted slightly off, but she attributed it to her unsettled stomach. They finished lunch quickly, tension building as Ivano coordinated with his security team. In the SUV, heading toward the warehouse district, the first wave of dizziness hit. The buildings outside began to blur and shift. Her tongue felt thick as she tried to form words. "Ivano," she managed. "Something's wrong." He turned sharply at the slurred quality of her voice. His face swam in her vision as she slumped against him, her muscles refusing to cooperate. The impact came out of nowhere, a brutal crash of metal on metal that sent the SUV spinning. Through drug-hazed eyes, she saw Ivano's normally controlled expression crack with panic as he lunged to cover her. Glass exploded inward as bullets peppered the vehicle. Despite the armor, something had pierced their defenses. Elisa felt Ivano's arms tighten around her as unfamiliar hands grabbed at her legs. She tried to fight, to hold on to consciousness, but the drug pulled her under. The last thing she registered was Ivano's voice, raw with rage and fear, shouting her name as someone dragged her into the darkness. Gunfire continued to echo, strangely muffled to her failing senses. Through the haze, one thought crystallized with brutal clarity. This was an inside job. Someone who knew their schedule, knew exactly where they would be. Someone with access to their security protocols and the authority to bypass them. As consciousness slipped away entirely, that bitter understanding followed her into the darkness. The enemy wasn't just out there. They were inside Ivano's organization, close enough to orchestrate this precise attack, close enough to know exactly when she would be vulnerable. The drugs pulled her deeper, and even that realization faded into nothing. Pain sliced through Elisa's consciousness like a serrated blade. Her head throbbed, each pulse sending waves of nausea through her drugged system. She forced her swollen eyes open, blinking against harsh fluorescent lights that flickered overhead. Metal pressed cold against her wrists and ankles. A chair, industrial, bolted to the concrete floor. The abandoned factory space stretched into shadows, the air thick with dust and the metallic tang of old machinery. 3 men moved in her peripheral vision. The first, tall and lean, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, methodically laid out tools on a rusty metal table. The second, heavy-set, with meaty hands, paced the perimeter. The third stood directly in front of her, studying her with clinical detachment. They'd cut away her right sleeve, exposing pale flesh, already bruising from rough handling. The lean one selected a knife, its edge gleaming under the stuttering lights. "Ms. Moretti," the man in front spoke, his voice cultured, almost pleasant. "Let's begin with something simple. Your client list from the past 5 years." Elisa's mind raced beneath her carefully maintained expression of fear. They were professionals, but not the sadistic kind who enjoyed their work. This was business. She could use that. "I don't," she started, voice cracking. "Perfect. Let them think the terror was real." The knife pressed against her forearm, just enough pressure to dimple the skin. "Please," the cultured voice continued, "don't insult us with denials. Your reputation as an information broker is well established." Across the city, Ivano Ricci stood in his war room, surrounded by monitors and frightened subordinates. His usual pristine appearance was disheveled, suit jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal corded forearms. His hands, normally steady, clenched and unclenched rhythmically. Traffic cameras picked up the van heading east, Giuseppe reported, pointing to grainy footage. They switched vehicles here, but— "Show me again!" Ivano's voice cut like ice. His men had never seen him like this. The cold calculation replaced by barely contained fury. The footage played. Ivano watched the precise timing of the attack, the professional execution. This wasn't random. This was planned, coordinated. Someone knew their schedule, their security protocols. Back in the factory, blood trickled down Elisa's arm from the shallow cut, a warning stroke designed to demonstrate intent rather than cause real damage. She gasped appropriately, letting tears gather. "Please," she whimpered. "I can't. My clients trust me with their secrets." "And they'll continue to," the cultured man assured her. "We simply need to verify some information, names, dates, the nature of their inquiries." Elisa's mind cataloged details even through the pain. They hadn't mentioned the encrypted messages or murdered clients. This was about her past work, not the current situation. Different players, different agenda. Ivano armed himself with methodical precision. Shoulder holster, backup piece at his ankle, ceramic knife against his forearm. His movements were measured, deliberate, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made his most hardened men step back. Traffic patterns, property records, and informant reports had narrowed the search. An abandoned factory complex on the city's eastern edge. Once they had the location, Ivano brushed aside his security team's protests. "I'm going in personally." The factory door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and metal. Ivano moved through the debris like a force of nature, each step purposeful, each shot precise. The heavy-set man fell first, a single round through his temple before he could raise his weapon. The lean one managed to get off a shot that went wide before Ivano's bullet found his heart. The cultured man dropped his knife, hands rising as he backed away. "Wait! The Castellanos! They hired us! They wanted information about her clients." Ivano's expression didn't change as he advanced. "You touched what's mine!" The gunshot echoed through the cavernous space. Ivano crossed to Elisa in 3 long strides, his hands suddenly gentle as he examined her bonds. The transformation was startling, the lethal efficiency replaced by careful tenderness as he freed her wrists. "I thought," his voice cracked, the mask of control slipping. "I thought I'd lost you?" Elisa sagged against him as he lifted her, breathing in gunpowder and expensive cologne. His heart hammered against her cheek through his blood-spattered shirt. "I need to tell you something," she murmured. "The trafficking ring from 20 years ago, the one where you found me, I've been tracking what's left of it. I think someone connected to it has infiltrated your organization." She felt him go rigid, his arms tightening protectively around her. When he spoke, his voice held the same deadly promise she'd just witnessed in action. "Then we'll find them together," he vowed. "Because you've become my greatest weakness, Elisa Moretti, and I can't afford to lose you again." 3 days after the kidnapping, Elisa winced as the doctor gently probed her ribs. The morning sunlight streaming through Ivano's bedroom windows highlighted the purple-yellow bruises marking her skin. She sat perched on the edge of his massive bed, wearing one of his silk shirts that dwarfed her frame. Ivano paced behind the doctor, his usual pristine appearance showing signs of strain. Tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes from nights spent watching over her in an uncomfortable chair. He hadn't returned to his makeshift bed on the sofa since bringing her home, refusing to leave her side even when she insisted she was fine. "The knife wound is healing cleanly," the doctor reported, examining the bandage on her arm. "Keep it dry for another day. The ribs are bruised, not broken. Rest and careful movement are best." Ivano's jaw clenched at the mention of her injuries. His protective instincts had gone into overdrive since the rescue, transforming the controlled crime boss into an attentive caretaker who personally supervised every aspect of her recovery. Once the doctor left, Ivano helped Elisa settle against the pillows, his touch impossibly gentle for hands that had dealt death so efficiently in that warehouse. "You should rest," he said, but made no move to leave. "We need to work," Elisa countered. "Show me everything. Personnel files, security protocols, organizational structure. I can't help identify the infiltrator without complete information." Ivano studied her for a long moment before nodding. He retrieved his laptop and settled beside her on the bed, close enough that she felt his warmth through the silk shirt. "No more secrets between us," he agreed, opening encrypted files that detailed every aspect of his operation. They spent hours reviewing data, Elisa's analytical mind finding patterns Ivano had missed. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she cross-referenced his personnel against her extensive database of trafficking operations. Ivano watched in growing appreciation as she worked, seeing not the traumatized child he'd saved, but a brilliant strategist who'd transformed herself into a force to be reckoned with. When evening came, Ivano insisted they pause for dinner, having food brought to his rooms rather than joining his lieutenants downstairs. They ate sitting cross-legged on his bed, sharing pasta from the same plate as Elisa detailed her theories about potential weak points in his organization. "Here," she pointed to shipping manifests on the screen. "These contract changes, they're subtle, but they're designed to create confusion and delays. Someone's trying to disrupt your supply lines." Ivano leaned closer, his shoulder pressing against hers as he examined the documents. "You just saved me millions in potential losses," he said, his voice rough with admiration. His hand covered hers on the keyboard, lingering longer than necessary. The intimacy of their position struck them both, sharing food and space, working in comfortable synchronization, her wearing his clothes while sitting in his bed. It felt domestic, natural, as if they'd been partners for years instead of days. Later that night, as Elisa helped him sort through intelligence reports, she found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. "After you rescued me, I gained weight deliberately," she admitted quietly. "I saw how men looked at pretty, delicate women. I wanted to be overlooked, invisible. It became my armor." Ivano's hand stilled on the papers he was reviewing. "That night changed everything for me too," he confessed. "Finding you in those chains. I'd always known my family's business was violent, but I'd never confronted true evil before. It rewrote my moral code. No children, no trafficking, no exceptions. Anyone who breaks those rules dies." Their growing closeness hit its first friction point when Ivano received word that the Castellanos wanted to arrange a meeting. "You're not going," he declared flatly when Elisa insisted on being involved. "You don't get to decide what I can handle," she challenged, rising from the bed to confront him despite the protest from her bruised ribs. Even with their height difference, she stood her ground, amber eyes flashing. "I didn't survive everything I've been through to be sheltered now." Ivano's carefully maintained control cracked. His hands came up to cup her face, fingers trembling slightly against her skin. "Don't you understand?" he ground out. "Every person I've ever cared about has been used against me, and you—" Words failed him, but Elisa understood. Rising on her tiptoes, she pressed her lips to his, pouring 20 years of fantasy and fear into the kiss. Ivano responded instantly, lifting her against him as passion overtook caution. Her curves fit perfectly against his hard planes, soft and yielding where he was all controlled strength. "You're perfect," he whispered reverently as he laid her on the bed, his hands exploring every inch of her body with careful devotion. "Exactly as you are. Perfect and mine." Morning light painted golden stripes across rumpled sheets as Elisa stirred in Ivano's embrace. His powerful arms cradled her curves, one hand splayed protectively across her stomach. For the first time since her childhood trauma, she felt completely safe, treasured rather than judged, protected rather than controlled. Ivano nuzzled the sensitive spot behind her ear, his usual sharp edges softened by lingering satisfaction. "Bella," he murmured, fingers tracing idle patterns on her skin. "I've waited 20 years to hold you like this." Elisa turned in his arms, studying the rare vulnerability in his expression. Last night had transformed them both, each kiss healing old wounds, each touch replacing painful memories with pleasure. She reached up to trace the stubble along his jaw, marveling at how natural it felt to be here. The peaceful moment shattered as Ivano's phone erupted in a cascade of urgent alerts. His body tensed, the lover instantly replaced by the crime boss as he reached for the device. Elisa watched his expression darken as he read the messages. "FBI raids," he growled, already moving with lethal grace. "Multiple properties, coordinated strikes." He grabbed his tablet, accessing security protocols while speaking rapid instructions into his phone. Elisa pulled on his discarded shirt, the intimacy of moments ago replaced by professional focus as she moved to help. She froze when she saw Ivano's expression change from concern to cold suspicion. "Someone accessed my personal servers last night," he said carefully, turning the tablet to show her. "Using codes only you and I know. The logs show it came from your workstation, while you were supposedly in my bed." "That's impossible," Elisa protested, scanning the data. Her heart sank as she recognized her digital signature on the access logs. Ivano, I swear I didn't! A sharp knock interrupted as Luca entered, his face grim. He handed Ivano a burner phone in an evidence bag. Found this hidden in her original belongings, boss. Recent communications with FBI agent Rossi. The transformation in Ivano was instant and devastating. All traces of tenderness vanished behind the impenetrable mask she'd seen him wear with enemies. His eyes, warm with passion hours ago, turned to frozen obsidian. Ivano, please! Elisa reached for him, flinching at his instinctive recoil. I'm being framed. Think about it. Why would I expose myself after working so hard to find you? The panic room, he ordered, voice devoid of emotion. For your protection while we handle this situation. The underlying meaning was clear. She was now a prisoner. 2 guards appeared to escort her. Elisa lifted her chin, refusing to show how deeply his distrust wounded her. Last night meant nothing then? You still see me as that helpless child, unable to make my own choices? Something flickered in his eyes, but his expression remained hard. What I see is evidence of betrayal from the one person I allowed myself to trust. Take her. The panic room was a technological fortress, equipped with surveillance feeds and limited computer access. Elisa watched FBI teams swarm Ivano's legitimate businesses, her analytical mind already moving past the hurt to examine patterns. She pulled up the encrypted messages left at the murder scenes, breaking down the coding methodology. Her fingers stilled as she recognized a distinctive signature in the encryption, one she'd seen before, in the darkest period of her life. Impossible, she whispered, double-checking her analysis. But the pattern was unmistakable, unique markers she'd first seen in the computer systems that had controlled security at the warehouse where she'd been held captive. The same warehouse where Ivano had saved her, supposedly killing the man who ran the trafficking operation. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. The infiltration of Ivano's organization, the targeted attacks on her former clients, the expertly crafted frame job, using her own methods against her. Only someone who knew both her past and present could have orchestrated this. Roberto Falcone, she breathed, the name sending chills down her spine. Roberto, the sadistic mastermind who had held her captive. Roberto, who was supposed to have died in Ivano's raid. Roberto, whose brother Romano now served as Ivano's trusted consigliere. She stared at the surveillance feeds, seeing Romano move through the chaos of the FBI raids with careful precision. Everything about his behavior took on new meaning as she realized the truth. The supposedly dead brother had spent 20 years orchestrating his revenge from the shadows, using his position to systematically corrupt Ivano's organization from within. Ivano stood alone in his ransacked office, the chaos of the FBI, raid evident in overturned furniture and emptied filing cabinets. He swirled aged whiskey in a crystal tumbler, its amber depths matching the turmoil in his eyes. Papers littered the floor like fallen leaves, each one representing another piece of his carefully built empire now exposed. "Show me the arrest reports again," he commanded into his phone, his voice hoarse from hours of crisis management. The sophisticated coordination of the raids gnawed at him. Even with inside information, the FBI's precision suggested knowledge far deeper than what Elisa could have provided in her short time here. Down in the panic room, Elisa's fingers flew across the keyboard, her mind racing faster than her hands could type. Years of breaking security systems had taught her to recognize patterns, and the panic room's defenses held a fatal flaw. They hadn't been designed to contain someone with her expertise. She carefully dismantled the electronic locks while monitoring the surveillance feeds, showing Ivano in endless damage control meetings. Her heart ached watching him, remembering the tenderness they'd shared just hours ago. But she couldn't wait for him to trust her again, not when Roberto Falcone was orchestrating everything from the shadows. Upstairs, Ivano reviewed security footage from the raids, his suspicion growing as he noticed Romano's conspicuous absences during critical moments. His consigliere's explanations grew increasingly convenient, each one fitting too perfectly into the narrative of Elisa's betrayal. "Pull Romano's phone records," Ivano ordered Luca. "Something isn't adding up." Elisa slipped through the estate's grounds like a ghost, using blind spots she'd mapped during her first escape attempt. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd stayed then because Ivano asked, and now she was leaving because she had to save him. When Ivano finally broke away from his meetings to confront Elisa, to apologize for doubting her and share his growing suspicions about Romano, he found the panic room empty. Security footage showed nothing but static, her expertise evident in the clean getaway. His network of surveillance cameras and informants led him to the Waldorf downtown. The luxury hotel suite door stood slightly ajar, a silent invitation that screamed trap. Inside, FBI agent Rossi's body sprawled across Egyptian cotton sheets, blood staining the white fabric crimson. Ivano approached slowly, noting the professional execution. Single shot to the head. A paper had been pinned to Rossi's chest with surgical precision. The message, written in elegant script, made his blood run cold. The monster who owned me now owns part of you. R.F. Those initials. That signature. Memories of the warehouse raid 20 years ago flooded back. The screaming children, the smell of gasoline, the explosion that should have killed Roberto Falcone. Ivano found Romano in his private study, calmly organizing papers as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Your brother survived, Ivano said flatly, no question in his voice. Romano's careful composure cracked. You have no idea what you did to him, he whispered, decades of hidden anguish surfacing. The burns, the surgeries, the years of reconstruction. He lost everything that night, his face, his operation, his prized possession. Elisa was a child, Ivano snarled, disgust rising at Romano's defense of his brother's depravity. She was his masterpiece, Romano shot back. And you took her, everything since. The murders, the FBI raids, bringing her back to you. It's all been for this moment. 20 years of planning, just to watch you lose everything like he did. A soft beep from Ivano's phone drew his attention. The GPS tracker he'd hidden in Elisa's locket when she first arrived was active, showing a location that made his chest tighten. The abandoned warehouse where everything began. The derelict structure loomed against the night sky, its broken windows like dead eyes watching their approach. Ivano positioned his most trusted men strategically, though something told him Roberto would have planned for this. Inside, the warehouse air hung thick with dust and memory. Each step echoed off concrete floors, still stained dark in places, marking where lives had been forever changed 2 decades ago. Roberto Falcone stood in a pool of weak light, one hand holding a gun to Elisa's head. The right side of his face was a masterwork of reconstructive surgery, but the left remained a maze of burn scars, a permanent reminder of the fire Ivano had set. Welcome to our reunion, Roberto announced with theatrical flourish. The savior, the monster, and the child, all grown up. I've waited decades for this moment. His free hand gestured expansively at the warehouse around them. Everything perfectly arranged, using her skills to eliminate my rivals while framing her for their murders, manipulating events to bring her back to you. She was supposed to betray you, he sneered, pressing the gun harder against Elisa's temple. Not fall in love with you. Such a disappointing lack of survival instinct. As Roberto detailed his plans for their execution, Elisa caught Ivano's eye. Her hand slowly opened, revealing the signal jammer she'd been developing in his office. Ivano gave an almost imperceptible nod, understanding flowing between them without words. The signal jammer hummed to life in Elisa's palm, cutting off all communication in the warehouse. Roberto's confident smirk faltered as his earpiece went dead. The backup he'd stationed outside, now unreachable. That moment of confusion was all Ivano needed. He launched himself forward with predatory grace, absorbing the impact of Roberto's startled shot in his left shoulder. The bullet tore through muscle, but adrenaline dulled the pain as he tackled Roberto away from Elisa. They crashed into rusted chains hanging from the ceiling, the metal links singing with remembered horrors. You should have stayed dead, Ivano growled, driving his fist into Roberto's reconstructed face. Blood sprayed from the man's nose, but he laughed, a horrible sound that echoed off concrete walls. And you should have killed me properly the first time, Roberto spat back, bringing his knee up into Ivano's wounded shoulder. The pain sent white spots dancing across Ivano's vision. Elisa scrambled toward a fallen gun, her ribs screaming in protest. She'd spent too many years running from her past. Not anymore. The two men fought brutally among the remnants of Roberto's former operation. Each cage they slammed against, each chain they sent swinging, carried the ghostly echoes of children who had suffered here. Blood, both old and fresh, stained the concrete floor beneath their feet. Roberto fought with the desperate strength of a man who'd spent 20 years planning this moment. He drove Ivano back against a support beam, pressing his forearm against Ivano's throat. You think you saved her? He sneered. I owned her soul before you ever found her. Everything she is, everything she became, it's because of me. Ivano's response was a headbutt that sent Roberto staggering backward. She survived you, he snarled. That's all you ever were, something to survive. They traded blows with increasing savagery. Roberto's theatrical facade crumbled, revealing the true monster beneath. His disfigured face twisted with psychotic rage as he pulled a hidden knife, slashing at Ivano's already injured shoulder. Elisa's hands shook as she raised the gun, memories of her childhood captivity threatening to overwhelm her. The warehouse's shadows seemed to writhe with old terrors, the sound of children crying, the rattle of chains, Roberto's soft voice promising that she was his perfect little prisoner. The knife found its mark in Ivano's side, and he stumbled. Roberto pressed his advantage, knocking Ivano to the ground with brutal efficiency. Standing over him, Roberto raised the bloody knife for a killing blow. "I'm going to take everything from you," he promised. "Just like you took everything from me, and then I'll take her back, my perfect little Elisa. She'll learn to be mine again." The gunshot echoed like thunder in the enclosed space. Roberto looked almost surprised as he touched the spreading red stain on his chest. The bullet had passed through his heart and grazed Ivano's already wounded shoulder before embedding itself in the concrete floor. Elisa stood with the smoking gun still raised, her hands now perfectly steady. "I was never yours," she said quietly. Roberto's lips moved, blood staining his teeth as he choked out his final words. "She was mine first, the perfect little prisoner. Everything I built, you destroyed for her." His body crumpled to the floor, the light fading from his eyes, as 2 decades of obsession died with him. The warehouse erupted with activity as Ivano's men swarmed in, securing the scene and eliminating Roberto's associates who had been waiting outside. Elisa rushed to Ivano's side, her trained eyes quickly assessing his injuries. "Always saving me," Ivano murmured as she applied pressure to his wounds. "We save each other," she corrected, using strips torn from her shirt to create makeshift bandages. Her movements were sure and practiced, speaking of years spent patching herself up after dangerous operations. The drive back to the estate passed in a blur of sirens and urgent phone calls. Ivano's private medical team was waiting, whisking him into surgery to repair the damage from Roberto's knife and bullet. Hours later, Elisa sat beside Ivano's bed in his private medical suite, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. The monitors beeped quietly, confirming what her heart already knew: he would survive. "You're staring," Ivano said without opening his eyes. "Making sure you're real," she admitted. "For so long, you were just this perfect memory, the monster who saved me." His eyes opened then, dark and intense despite the pain medication. "I was never perfect." "No," she agreed, taking his hand. "You were better than perfect. You were real. Every man I met, I compared to my memory of you. They all fell short." "That night," Ivano said slowly, "saving you was the only purely good thing I've ever done. Everything since, eliminating trafficking operations, protecting my people. It was all an attempt to be worthy of how you saw me." Elisa leaned forward, pressing her lips to his knuckles. "Let me protect you now," she whispered, "while you heal." And she did. In the weeks that followed, Elisa took control of Ivano's organization with the same precision she'd used to build her intelligence network. She identified and eliminated every trace of Roberto's corruption, rebuilding Ivano's empire stronger than before. 6 months passed like a dream, each day cementing the reality of their shared future. Elisa stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite, her reflection almost startling in its radiance. The custom wedding dress, a masterpiece of ivory silk and delicate lace, celebrated every curve of her body. The designer had followed her unconventional request to leave one sleeve shorter, proudly displaying the scar on her arm, a testament to survival rather than a mark to hide. Her hair fell in loose waves, adorned with tiny pearl pins that caught the light. The matching pearl necklace had belonged to Ivano's mother, retrieved from the family vault as a symbol of acceptance into the Ricci legacy. But it was her eyes that drew attention, bright with joy and fierce with hard-won strength. The door opened behind her, and she caught Ivano's reflection entering against all traditional superstition. He wore a black tuxedo that emphasized his powerful frame, though he moved with the same lethal grace that had first drawn her eye. Their gazes met in the mirror, and the raw emotion in his expression made her breath catch. "You look like everything I never deserved," he said, his voice rough with feeling. His hands settled on her shoulders, warm and steady, the hands that had both killed for her and held her with infinite tenderness. "I have something for you," he continued, reaching into his jacket. "One final wedding gift." He withdrew an elegantly bound document, holding it where she could read the contents. Elisa's eyes widened as she recognized the address, the warehouse where their story had begun. "It's been completely transformed," Ivano explained. "A shelter and resource center for trafficking survivors, private security, medical facilities, legal aid, job training, everything they need to rebuild their lives. In your name." Tears threatened to spill as Elisa turned to face him. "You impossible man," she whispered, touching his face. "Always finding new ways to save people." "I learned from you," he replied. "You showed me that true strength isn't about control. It's about giving others the power to save themselves." Their private moment stretched until a discreet knock reminded them of waiting guests. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of ancient Italian vows and modern promises. The reception transformed the estate's ballroom into a fairy tale, though one where the guests included both legitimate business leaders and carefully vetted members of their criminal empire. The new inner circle they'd built after Roberto's betrayal maintained security with invisible efficiency. Giuseppe had been replaced by younger, loyal blood. Romano's position as consigliere was now filled by a shrewd woman who'd proven her worth during the organization's restructuring. Even Luca had stepped aside, recognizing that his failure to detect Roberto's infiltration required accountability. When the orchestra began their first dance, Ivano led Elisa onto the floor with the same confidence he brought to everything. But there was softness in how he held her, reverence in every touch. They moved together with practiced ease, having spent countless evenings dancing in private as they planned this day. As the music slowed to a more intimate rhythm, Elisa gathered her courage. She'd been waiting for the perfect moment to share her secret, and surrounded by their closest allies, watching the man who'd become her everything, she knew the time had come. She guided Ivano's hand from her waist to rest against her stomach, where the first subtle roundness had just begun to show beneath her dress. His brow furrowed in confusion before understanding dawned in his eyes. "Against all medical odds," she whispered, thinking of the reproductive trauma she'd suffered during her captivity, the doctors who'd said she'd never carry a child. "It seems I'll keep my promise after all." The feared boss of the Chicago underworld, the man who'd built an empire through calculated control, dropped to his knees before her. The entire room fell silent, watching their leader press reverent lips to his bride's stomach, tears tracking unashamedly down his face. "Our child will know only protection, never possession," he vowed, his voice carrying in the hushed space. "You taught me the difference, Elisa. You made a monster human again." Rising to his feet, Ivano found himself caught by Elisa's hands framing his face. Her amber eyes held the same fierce certainty they'd shown the night she'd walked into his office and changed his world forever. "Not a monster," she corrected firmly. "Just a man, my man, with the capacity for both darkness and light. And now, finally, we both step into the light together." The orchestra resumed playing, but they remained lost in their private moment. Ivano's hand stayed protectively over her stomach, while her fingers traced the strong line of his jaw. They'd forged something unprecedented, a partnership of equals built on shared trauma transformed into strength, on darkness balanced with redemption. The gathering of guests watched the intimate display with varying reactions. The old guard seemed uncertain how to process this public showing of emotion from their formerly stoic leader. The newer members, selected carefully in the wake of Roberto's betrayal, saw it as confirmation that the Ricci family was evolving into something unique in their dangerous world. But Elisa and Ivano remained oblivious to the attention, swaying gently to the music as they had so many nights in private. His thumb brushed small circles against her stomach while she hummed along with the melody, both lost in thoughts of the future they'd fought so hard to make possible.